All right, here goes our video on values and principles. Again, I'm going to take this one off the cuff. Might be a little bit shorter than some of the other videos, but really just going over values and principles and how they kind of intervene into or intertwine into your life to help make it a bit more worthwhile, uh, help it be something more that's tuned for your liking and what satisfies you and the direction that you want to go in. So, what are values? They are the often strongly held beliefs and preferences that we have, that we want out of life, that we want to demonstrate either personally or what we value other people demonstrate towards us and to broader society. But for the purposes of this video, really, we're focusing on personal values and personal principles. The main reason for that is that we have control over ourselves. We are able to think and feel differently and control these things with our own effort, sometimes significant effort. We have a lot more control and influence over ourselves than to other people. And so, in saying that, when we kind of identify some values that we want to live by and exhibit to the world and demonstrate, we can have some of the most productive change by focusing in on ourselves and how we want to elicit that change in the world. So yeah, what values are, they're beliefs and preferences that we want to demonstrate and to be like. Could be things like honesty, authenticity, trustworthiness, responsibility, being a fair person, being open-minded, or having balance in one's life. Many people have several values that they want to live by or would prefer to live by and demonstrate. And so that's in essence what values are, just these preferences of how we want to be. And quite literally in the name, what we value about ourselves and our character and our personality and how we demonstrate that, yeah, I'm an honest person to the world. Principles, on the other hand, are more so the operationalized version of values. So for kindness, for instance, you might have a value of being a kind person, right? And the principle that you might use to demonstrate that is when somebody is speaking to me, I will give them my undivided attention. Where warranted, of course. Like some of these things you might not always be able to demonstrate kindness specifically in that example, but as a general principle to live by, if someone's speaking to me, I will give them an open ear for at least a few moments, and show that I'm willing to step into their life and be kind to them. Maybe kindness for you is an act of kindness. So when every time your loved one or your children come home, or you're home and your pet greets you, you don't shrug them off or just say, hey, or say nothing. You get up, you go to the door, you give them a hug every day to show and demonstrate your kindness. And really, like, what the principles are is ways in which we can limit some of our decision fatigue throughout the day, as so many things are a decision. Every little waking moment is a decision. But if you value kindness, and again, for an example, you might have the principle of, every chance I get, I'm going to listen to people. I'm going to get up and give my loved ones a hug when they leave and enter the home. You don't have to think about it. It's just the principle that you live by. It's not to say that they're dogmatic, and if one day you're on the toilet and your spouse comes home and you don't get up to give them a hug, that you're not a kind person or not exhibiting that value. They're not so rigid as that, but rather that when you're presented with a situation in life, you can kind of think to yourself, okay, I want to demonstrate kindness in this scenario. I demonstrate kindness by doing the following actions. And these things are normally thought on, thought and felt on. What feels right to you to demonstrate to that value of yours, whether, honesty or what have you. And then you can kind of go about life, and rather than thinking, okay, when my partner gets home, whether or not you had a really shitty day at work or just received some bad news, what have you. It's like, okay, I don't need to think about that necessarily. I don't need to burden myself with, am I going to get up off the couch and give that person a hug? Or am I going to speak the truth? No matter how hard of a truth it might be, I will do my best. And that's another part. Intentionality comes into this as well. I will do my best to say the truth no matter what. That might be a principle that you live by because you value honesty. As we kind of got into intentions there. So, despite, as you get into these values and principles of how you act on these values, so it might be your thoughts that you talk to yourself with or think about, how you view a situation. It might be your speech that you say to other people, how you communicate. It might be your behaviors throughout the day. These are all ways in which your principles can be manifestations of your values. But where the intentionality comes into play is that you might have it totally wrong. You might want to value honesty quite a bit and give a hard truth to somebody. And perhaps they're not ready to hear that, or they've also had a very rough day and they just want to relax. They don't want to talk about something difficult at the moment, but you intentionally went into that situation with good intentions. You were trying to be honest. You value honesty. And that's something that, despite the outcome from either the other person's reaction or maybe an action you took or behavior out in broader society and kind of manipulating the environment a bit, maybe the outcome's not always what you expected just because you value honesty. I'm just trying to think of one maybe out in the world. You always, to be honest to the world. Maybe if you see somebody littering, you say, hey, you speak up and you say, hey, littering's not the best for the planet, and it makes the environment just worse off for everybody else. Hey, please don't do that. Maybe they get really pissed off at you and say, frig off. But your intention there, and also in saying that, with one's personal safety in mind as well. But your intention is something important with your values. If you have good intentions, good honest intentions, not out to do harm or malicious acts with that honesty, then despite a negative reception from another person or the world, you can still say to yourself, I'm still living by my values. I'm still upholding them. Whereas if you were maliciously using a value of yours, like perhaps honesty, and you were told a secret in good faith, or some sort of deed that you did, like you could honestly do a deed that is malicious. You could, very much so do something like that with fully malicious intentions and also live up to that value, or spread a secret. And although you're speaking honestly, knowing full well that of the harm, and maybe you don't, but in this case we're talking about intentions. Perhaps you speak a secret to somebody else, and you're being honest in the sense where you're not holding back information that you know from other people who maybe aren't privy to that information. but you're doing it. It's not a slip of the tongue type of where you let the secret out. It's okay. I'm going to tell this person this truth and uphold my honesty, but with perhaps you don't like the person who told you the secret, or you have something to gain, and so there's some malicious intent there, and I suppose with some people, maybe full well, this is where some of these values can clash, because the full well they might be living honestly or kindly or what have you, but their intentions, is it good? Is it right to do it? Kind of get into the ethics of it, and these other, that's where it begins to conflict with other values. Like, do you want to be a kind person to the person you're telling the secret to, but also kind and courteous and respectful to the person who told you the secret in the first place? So that's where some of these values you might value two things at the same time, and most people value many things at the same time. Sometimes there can be a hierarchy there, and that hierarchy can change depending on the situation that you're in, the people you're around, your mood, the emotions circling around in your body and brain. But often people have better or more self-helping outcomes when their intentionality is good, and they mean well by using their values, well to themselves, well to other people, well to the world, and not necessarily using their values for malicious purposes or to put other people down. Like, you might value ambition and striving and challenge and getting ahead. But if that means that to get ahead, you are also willing to, you're ranking that higher than respect for other people, perhaps, or compassion, and you go out of your way to put somebody else into, metaphorically into the ground, their business, their reputation, what have you. It's not necessarily that it's right or wrong, but it's something where, so do you want to exhibit the value of ambition, but at what cost? What are the, I suppose, reactions or the effects and the secondary, tertiary effects of you exhibiting your values? It's something to consider, not to stifle you, but rather just to consider as you go about and live your life. People are largely, especially in the Western world here, self-interest is a value, a strong value. Self-interest and freedom are two very strong values in Western society here. And there's a fine line between where a value turns into a vice, and when, like with almost everything in life, when taken to the extreme, self-interest can turn into selfishness, and this is often seen as a vice, as who wants to work with a very selfish person who's only in it for themselves, or somebody where somebody who's self-interested isn't necessarily selfish. They want the best for themselves, but that doesn't mean that they're discounting the compassion they might also value towards other people, respect, open-mindedness to other opinions or to other points of view. These things are always kind of in flux, and they're going to be in flux at different times of the day, different times of life and seasons of life. Especially after things like a job loss or a death, a breakup, a debilitating injury or illness. What you value might change, and this is some, oftentimes where people really, a lot of the emotional, negative emotional feelings, thoughts, behaviors that people experience are because one or more of their values aren't being emphasized enough. And they're largely due to these, well, not largely, but they can arise quite often when there's a significant and drastic change in their quality of life, in their social circle, what have you. Or just things that are kind of like pick at you every day, like maybe a coworker always comments on, oh, you're not wearing that to work today again, are you? And yeah, it looks unflattering, or something like that. And the first couple of weeks of work, you just grin and bear it, and then after 6 months of these derogatory comments, you value self-respect, and this is being trodden on by this other person. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to make a comment to them? Are you going to dress differently and kind of capitulate to their, in the hopes that they stop? Are you going to, perhaps respect for that one individual then falls much lower on the hierarchy, and you make a quick snide comment back? All these things can happen, but it's when our values are just not satisfied or emphasized enough that emotional concerns and problems tend to arise. If you're a very active person and you really value freedom and just like longevity and health, I don't even know if health necessarily is a value. I would certainly consider it one. But health and longevity, you value that. Freedom and an injury means that for the next 6 months you are in a cast, or you can, the most you can do is leave the house for a kilometer walk for the next 6 months if you're lucky. Well, now that this injury is kind of a barrier to this strong value of yours, it can bring up feelings of sadness, oh my God, I have to live this way for so long, anxiety, what if I never get that, what if I never get my freedom back, what if it never fully heals? Could be anger, maybe it was in a car accident or a skiing accident or what have you, and F that person that didn't look up the hill before he crossed, and I slammed into him and broke my own leg. He got off scot-free, and now here I am missing out on the entire next season because I can barely walk, and I barely survived. My femur was shattered, or my knee blew up. These are real things that happen to people, real things, and these events like kind of stifle our expression of our values. And again, this is where a lot of emotions come up. It can always be helpful to, when you are feeling an emotion that concerns you and disturbs you, to reflect on, okay, what value of mine here is being trodden on or ignored, or just really isn't emphasized enough. If it ends up being a value of, say, compassion, or optimism, maybe. Let's go with optimism. And that's being, you're in a workplace, and maybe it's being very affected by these like tariff situations or larger global economic forces kind of beyond the control of the fabrication shop you work in, or the painting business that you work for, or what have you. But you really value optimism, and you go into work every single day, and people are moping about it, so upset. It's like everybody around you is being very pessimistic on the future, that things will never ever get better, that there's no way out of this. Well, then you yourself might find yourself very disturbed and drained, and just feeling, what am I doing here? And even starting to identify with some of that pessimistic energy that directly goes against your optimistic value of seeing things glass half full, a bit of a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day type of personality or person that you want to be. and it will very likely have an effect on you over time. So let's say you identify, I was always an optimistic person, and then the economy took that downturn. And I've been surrounded for the past 6 months with pessimistic attitudes. Oh shoot, I'm kind of lost. Where was I going with that? This optimism, intentions. Oh my goodness. Well, I bet it was really good. We're talking about optimism as just an example. Optimism. Here's a good point. Look, I might value control, right? I do. I value predicting certain things and doing everything in my power to make sure I have the best outcome possible for myself and my loved ones and the people in my life. But where that can tilt towards kind of self-defeating is like in that moment there where I forgot my train of thought. My God. If I demanded that I say this video perfectly, or that I can't say a single or but or weird awkward pause, or long awkward pause, or what have you, what's that really doing for me is it's kind of an example of like if you hold on to these values with too much tightness, and they're not a bit flexible, I can try and control everything in my life that I want to. I can try and have the perfect, nice little video on values and principles to live by. But, I can't control everything, and I'm not going to be perfect. So even though I can aspire towards the value of control and attempt to demonstrate that in most areas of my life, if I seek perfection, it will often become that saying, perfection is the enemy of good. In saying this, I'm still I'm trying to find it where I was going with that optimism piece, but I'm sure I don't tend to watch these videos after I put them out. But so if you can help me, put it down in the comments and it'd be like, oh, this is what you said a minute prior to that little thinking out loud aspect. I think I've said everything I want to say on values and principles. It's really it's something that's very personal for each person. It's important to not be too rigid with them, or else they tend to turn into vices, like we talked about. A value in control can quickly turn into perfectionism and this demanding, like things must go perfectly all the time, or else it's no good. And I would have scrapped this whole video and tried to think off the cuff again, and I don't want to do that. Because I also value my freedom and my free time, and I only have so much free time in the day to do things like this. I don't have time to do a second take on a 20-30 minute long video. But you can find, if you've listened to this far, thank you. Not many people watch these videos yet. Maybe if I'm talking to somebody that exists into the future watching, maybe I'm very popular by then, who knows. But if you've watched this far, I challenge you to reflect on your recent past, or just look at it for the next week. Look at something that disturbs you, or makes you emotionally upset, whether it's anxiety, sadness, frustration, guilt, regret, embarrassment, what have you, and see if you can't identify the value of yours that is being stepped on a little bit, or not emphasized as much as you would prefer it to be. And then if you want to take it a step further, think to yourself, okay, what's a principle I could make so the next time I'm in the next time I go into work and everybody's being a pessimist and I want to exhibit optimism, what's something I can do? The next time my coworker says, God damn it, no overtime again this week, or God damn it, I've been, they're taking me down to part-time hours. And, these are very real things to be, pretty upset about. But if how are you going to respond to that? It's like, okay, hey, buddy, or hey, John, or whatever. I know this is really upsetting to you. Like, how can we look at this on the bright side together? Or, what's something that you can do to change your situation to be more productive, or to have more positivity? And these are kind of just like in these make-believe types of situations. That might be a very difficult conversation if that person is struggling to put food on their table because they've been removed or taken down to part-time hours. But in essence, you're kind of going to take a stance and draw a line in the sand where, if someone's going to be complaining to you and not offering any, productive solutions to their own misfortune, whether it's caused by them or not, and you kind of just can't take the complaining and the pessimistic attitude anymore. What are you going to do about it that fulfills you, that satisfies yourself, so you can go home at the end of that work day and say, you know what, at least I tried to be a bit optimistic? Or is it that you decide, that John fellow, he's always so negative, and he might have very good reason to be, but right now I need to protect my own emotional energy, or my own sense of who I am and the kind of life I want to live. I want to be a bit more optimistic about the future. Yeah, I had my hours cut as well, or I haven't been given overtime in 4 or 5 months. But, I'm still trucking through. I'm still getting through it. I'm trying to identify ways to cut back on the budget, to, maybe you start a little side project. You're looking for a second part-time job. Maybe you're taking that extra time off to do a different welding course and learn how to fab aluminum, and upgrade yourself, so that way, next time something like this comes around, or there's an economic downturn, you're more employable, and so you might suffer less or have less of a risk, because you have multiple skills now, or you're more valuable asset to that company or to the field itself. So these are things that people will contend with, and I think if I start talking anymore, I will start reiterating a lot. So I will stop. So thank you for watching, and try and do that challenge. Find a value, and then identify a principle. Oh yeah, where I was getting at though with that principle was, every time John says something like that, I am going to, wish him a great day. Maybe he won't want to hear that, but I will wish him a good day. But then I'm gonna I'm gonna distance myself from John for the next, until break time or something. Or I'm gonna at least say something positive or optimistic, and at least say my piece. Thank you for watching, and comment below what value you identified and the principle that you're going to try and uphold. Thank you.